Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is your micro lecture for CY 631, week 5. This week 5, we are covering CISM Domain 3, the first half of it, Information Security Program Development and Management. All right. The focus of this portion of the CISM is to design, to develop, and the management of an enterprise a cybersecurity program. Of course, our objective is to ensure that the integrity of the CIA, which is the foundation of information security, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, is maintained throughout the process. Another thing we are establishing to do is to align security with our enterprise objectives, company objectives, as well as our compliance obligations, which will be our regulatory standards. Those would be HIPAA compliances, PCI compliances, federal compliances, all kinds of compliances. Building a security strategy. Here we want to create a long-term direction for protecting our enterprise assets as well as our data. The key elements here that we need to have is vision and mission, risk alignment, governance, and maturity tools. Now, as far as maturity models, tools, there's CMMI, there's the NIST cybersecurity framework. You could go with as simple as the CIS top 18 security controls, etc. For policy, standards, procedures, this is a high-level management intent. For example, encrypting sensitive data, either at rest or in transit, or while it is sitting in your databases. Or it could also be your backups that are either stored on tapes or just on native disks. They need to be encrypted as well. Now, the standard here is the AES 256 standard. This is treated as a mandatory rule. And then for procedures, you're going to want to create a step-by-step implementation guide, starting with the high level, all the way down to procedural activities with regards to database administrators, server administrators, etc. Now the guideline here is to do best practice. That'll be TLS 1.3. And there are many policies, standards, and procedures. This is just an example with regard to encrypting sensitive data. There's also asset management, which will include your hardware and software assets. There's going to be data protection, which is along the lines of encrypting your sensitive data. There's data management, which goes along the lines of making sure you have data classification, data handling, data destruction procedures. And then you have config management, which talks about hardening processes, etc. And there are many. It depends on the maturity model that you are trying to implement. Okay, security architecture concepts. The definition here is that these are blueprints of processes, technologies, governance, data flows. The frameworks that are to be followed here are SAPSA, TOGAF, NIST, ISO 27001, And the core concepts included in security architectures are defense in depth, zero trust, segmentation, least privilege, identity management, role-based access, etc. And this is all going to be covered in your materials for the week. Make sure you're reading those as well. That is going to be covering these topics a little more in depth. And then we have resource planning, people. We have analysts, engineers, responders, incident responders. This is kind of working or talking about cybersecurity personnel in general, but in reality, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. So when we're talking about people, it needs to go outside just cybersecurity. It needs to include your application developers. It needs to include your database administrators. It needs to include your system administrators, network administrators, etc. And why is resource planning important? Resource planning is important because one, we have to align with the objectives of the company, right? So we have to make sure we are able to make time for our company steered projects that might be dealing with increasing the growth of the company, either by way of increasing revenue, increasing our markets, and all that. So that resource planning percentage, let's say 50%, right? 50% of all resources must work towards the goals of the company. Now, let's say 25% is addressing perhaps improving the security posture of the company, right? Whether that's applying security patches, addressing vulnerabilities, etc. The point is you're making time for these types of activities when you were talking about resource planning. With some companies, they struggle with making time for even doing a simple activities such as patching or addressing vulnerabilities. All they're doing is addressing the company objectives, perhaps developing a new application, standing up new systems for the company, but constantly ignoring applying the patches, and therefore the risk landscape or the threat landscape for these systems applications is continuingly to increase because people are not patching, people are not addressing vulnerabilities, right? So these are very important in resource planning, and it needs to cover more than just the cybersecurity team. It needs to cover all the teams within IT. Budget and fundamentals, CapEx. This is a one-time investment. We're talking about perhaps buying or investing in new firewalls, next generation firewalls. And then we have OpEx, operating expenses or ongoing costs. These are your software as a service tools. These are your salaries, right? These are your subscriptions. Budget justifications must include risk-based justifications, regulatory compliance, return on investment, or total cost of ownership. Okay, next slide. All right, now we're talking about matrices and continuous improvement. In this area, we're talking about KPI, which stands for key performance indicators. You might be tracking the mean time to detect, mean time to respond. And then we have KRI percentages. These are the percentages systems are unpatched, which would go past the service level agreements. We also have maturity assessments here. We have COBIT, CMMI, or you could just be assessing your cybersecurity maturity against your security models, your NIST, your ISO 27001, your CIS Top 18 critical security controls. All these combined will prove the program value and effectiveness, and this will help the company make critical decisions as far as investing more into the teams or investing more into tool sets to better improve or make processes more efficient. Now let's discuss some key terms and definitions here. So governance, we're talking about oversight mechanisms. These are policies, procedures, standards. Risk appetite is the willingness to accept the risk. And then risk tolerance is the acceptable variance of a risk. Baseline is the minimum required tools, right? Perhaps the minimum required tool for your workstation is an endpoint detection and response, EDR, or antivirus to be installed. Security charter, this is the authority and scope statement of the cybersecurity team. And then we'll have roadmaps. Roadmaps, these are the timelines of initiatives, generally driven by either a risk register or a maturity model assessment, right? So to conclude, the security program includes strategy, architecture, and resources. This will include policies and procedures to ensure consistency, budgeting aligned costs with value for cybersecurity, and then we need to have metrics to prove our effectiveness. A mature program becomes a business enabler in all the companies. An immature cybersecurity program becomes a roadblock. Remember that. All right, folks, I believe that'll conclude our micro lecture for the week. Apologies for this session for being late. I will post this immediately after it converts to YouTube. Thank you.